The room she left behind. I'm not sure if anyone will believe me, but I need to get this off my chest. Last summer, I was on a 3-week business trip to Los Angeles. To save money, I booked a room through a certain home-sharing service. Let's just call it Company X. The place looked decent in the photos. A good location, cheap, and with surprisingly solid reviews. It was an old apartment in a quiet part of town. I got the entry code via email and let myself in using a keypad lock. The moment I stepped in, I noticed this strong scent in the air, like heavy perfume, sweet, floral, almost suffocating. The place looked clean enough. The kitchen was compact but neat. The living room had a small couch and a dusty TV, and the bedroom had a queen-sized bed. Then there was the mirror. It was tall, antique, nailed directly to the wall opposite the bed. The frame was carved wood, worn down at the corners. The carpet right in front of it was slightly discolored, like something had been resting there for a long time. Weird, but I was too tired to care. I crashed hard that night. The weird stuff started the second night. I woke up sometime after 2 a.m. I wasn't sure what woke me. Maybe the heat. Maybe a bad dream. But as I turned over in bed, my eyes landed on the mirror. There was someone else in the reflection. A woman. Long black hair. White dress. She was facing away from me, standing next to the bed. I jumped up and turned on the light. No one there. I checked the closet, the hallway, the bathroom. Empty. I looked back at the mirror. Only me now. I barely slept after that. The next night, my coworker Mike asked to crash at my place since we had an early meeting the next day. I hesitated, but I said, okay. The bed was big enough for 2. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to him murmuring in his sleep, "No, don't look. She's there." His eyes were shut tight. He was sweating, shaking. I nudged him awake. He sat up, pale and wide-eyed, and pointed at the mirror. I saw her. In the mirror. She was standing right there. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. We both knew something was seriously wrong. He slept on the couch after that. The next few nights, more small things happened. I'd find my toothbrush moved. The bathroom light would be on, even though I was sure I turned it off. The perfume smell got stronger, cloying, like it was seeping from the walls. I tried reporting it to the host, but got no reply. I even looked at the old reviews again. Most were 5 stars, but one, buried deep in the history, said, "Couldn't sleep. Felt like someone was watching me." That mirror really gave me the creeps. That review isn't on the listing anymore. I only saw it because I'd opened it before. It was in my browser cache. The night before I left, I was packing my suitcase when I heard a loud crash. I rushed to the bedroom. My suitcase, which had been zipped and standing upright, was now on its side, 2 feet away from where I left it. I slowly looked toward the mirror, and there she was. This time, she was facing me. But she had no face. Where her features should have been was just stretched skin. Still, I could tell. She was looking straight at me. I don't remember grabbing my keys. I just know I ran, barefoot, phone in my hand, and ended up standing in the stairwell, shaking. The next morning, I checked out early and spoke briefly with the building manager, who happened to be around. I asked, "Hey, do you know who used to live in that apartment?" He paused. "Girl in her 20s, lived alone, moved out a couple years ago," he said. Then he shrugged. "Why?" I didn't answer. I still think about that place. I wonder if she's still there, waiting. And if someone else has booked it now, thinking they got a great deal. Maybe they'll notice the perfume first, or the way the mirror is bolted to the wall. If you ever see a listing in LA with glowing reviews and a big antique mirror in the bedroom, don't book it. You might not be alone. The Lost Melody. It had been 3 years since I last heard from Kevin, my best friend from college, when he called me out of the blue. "Can you come out here? I'm working at a recording studio in the woods, up in Oregon. Something strange is going on." Kevin had always been into music. He majored in audio engineering and talked about opening his own studio someday. But I'd never heard him mention working in the middle of nowhere. Still, something in his voice felt urgent, so I cleared a weekend and drove up. The GPS led me off the main roads into an unpaved trail wrapped in dense forest. Finally, I reached a 2-story wooden building surrounded by trees. It looked abandoned, windows covered with thick curtains, the porch creaking under its own weight. When Kevin opened the door, I barely recognized him. Sunken eyes, pale skin, and that jittery energy of someone who hadn't slept in days. "You look like hell," I said. "I haven't been sleeping much," he muttered. "Come on. I need you to hear something." He led me into the studio. The room was packed with modern equipment, but at the center of the soundproofed wall was an ancient reel-to-reel tape recorder. It looked completely out of place. "This thing was already here when I started working," Kevin said. "Tried to get rid of it, but it's jammed into the wall or something. One day, I played the tape, and there was something recorded on it." He hit play. A soft click. Then a melody filled the room. If you could call it a melody. It was a disjointed series of piano notes, played off rhythm, slightly out of tune. The kind of thing that scratched at your nerves without you knowing why. "What is this?" I asked. "I don't know. But the more I listen to it, the more I see things in my head, faces, places I've never been. And when I started re-recording the track, I found something buried in the waveform." He pulled up his audio software and zoomed in on a section of distorted static. The waveform formed a strange, pulsing pattern. "I thought it might be a voice," he said, "so I reversed it." He hit play again. This time, the speakers hissed with a low, guttural sound. Not quite words, but human in a way that made my skin crawl. Like someone moaning underwater. No language, just pain. Suddenly, the room lights flickered. "Happens a lot now," Kevin said quietly. I stayed in a small guest room that night, next to the studio. But even in bed, that warped melody played on a loop in my mind. Those erratic piano notes, the moaning. Near dawn, I heard it again. The piano. Software slow. Deliberate. Then footsteps. Not loud, but enough to make the floor creak. stopping right outside my door. I held my breath. The air felt thick. Then, a soft scraping. Not knocking. Something, or someone, was dragging its nails along the door. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. After what felt like forever, I opened the door. No one was there. I ran to Kevin's room. He was awake, staring at his screen. "You heard it too," he whispered. "I recorded it," he said, hitting play again. The piano was clearer now, more structured. It was like the melody had evolved. "Do you think," Kevin said, voice trembling, "that something's trying to finish the song through us?" The next morning, I left. A few weeks later, Kevin disappeared. When they sent a search team to the studio, they found the building empty. No sign of Kevin. Just the tape recorder, still running, playing the same melody. Only this time, the melody had grown, and someone else was still recording, whispering cobblestones. Last summer, I was traveling solo through Italy. After checking out most of the big tourist spots, I decided to explore some lesser-known parts of an old city, places that locals recommended if you wanted a more authentic feel. One local mentioned a narrow cobblestone alley tucked away near the edge of the old town. It didn't show up in photos or reviews, but oddly enough, there was a highly rated restaurant pinned at the end of that path. Curious, I followed the map and made my way there one afternoon. The alley was shadowed, even in broad daylight, sandwiched between tall, time-worn buildings that leaned inward like they were whispering to each other. The air felt unnaturally cool. It was quiet. No cars, no chatter, just my footsteps echoing faintly against the stones. Then I realized there were more footsteps than there should have been. At first, I thought I was being paranoid, but I swear I could hear a second pair of shoes, sharp, measured steps behind me. I stopped walking. The sound stopped too. I turned around. Nobody. No tourists. No locals. Just the narrowing alley behind me. I started walking again. The click, click of leather soles resumed. Definitely not the rubber soles of my sneakers. The second pair was slower than mine, just slightly off rhythm. To prove I wasn't losing it, I started recording a video on my phone. I held it low, lens pointed behind me, and kept walking for about 30 seconds. Once I turned a corner into a wider street, I stopped and played the video back. No one was there. But the audio? The footsteps were loud and clear, distinct from mine. And right before I turned the corner, there was something else. A voice. Software. Barely audible. It whispered, "Where?" in a breathy, crumbling tone, like wind over broken glass. That was enough. I left the area and went back to my hotel. That night, I played the video again. Same steps, same whisper. But this time, I noticed something that wasn't there before. Just before I turned the corner, in the far edge of the frame, a shadow flickered across the wall. Too far to see clearly, but it moved exactly in time with the phantom footsteps. It wasn't there in the first playback. I swear it wasn't. I tried uploading the video to my cloud account. File corrupted. Wouldn't open again after that. I checked the restaurant pin that led me there in the first place. It was gone. The spot still existed on the map, but there were no listings, no reviews, like it had never been there. And here's the part I can't shake. Right before I turned that corner, for just a moment, I had the strongest feeling that I passed someone. I didn't see their face, but it felt like we brushed shoulders. Even now, in dreams, I sometimes see myself walking through that alley again. But I'm not me. I'm watching from behind, following, at a slight delay. And just before I wake up, I always hear the same thing. This way, right behind me, right in my ear, and in the dream. I always smile, but I never remember choosing to. The light in the abandoned tunnel. A few years ago, I spent a couple of months backpacking through South America. Toward the end of the trip, I ended up in a remote part of Argentina. One of those quiet mountain towns with nothing but a gas station, a diner, and a few dusty roads cutting through hills and pine. The place wasn't even on most travel apps, but it had a kind of stillness that I liked. One evening, while chatting with an old mechanic at the gas station, he told me about a tunnel deep in the hills. "You won't find it on maps," he said, almost amused. "The road was closed decades ago. But if you ever drive east past the last switchback, you'll see it. Long tunnel, stone walls. Looks like something out of a dream." He didn't say anything more, just looked at me and added, "Don't go through it at night." Of course I went. 2 days later, I rented a dirt bike and followed the directions he gave. Sure enough, after winding through empty mountain roads, there it was, an old tunnel carved through the rock. No lights, no signs, just silence. I should have turned back the moment I saw it. The entrance looked like a gaping mouth, but I kept going. I switched on my high beam and rode in. At first, nothing unusual. Cool air, echoes of the engine. But then, halfway through, the light began to shift. It wasn't from my bike. It was ahead of me. A faint, pulsing blue light coming from deeper inside the tunnel. I slowed down. The air felt thick, like humidity without heat. The beam from my bike flickered slightly, as if it were passing through something. And then I saw the car, a silver sedan, parked on the side. Lights off. No driver. It was weird, because there was no way that car had passed me on the road. There'd been no tire marks, no sound. I got off the bike and approached slowly. The car looked old. Early 2000s model, maybe. Dusty, but no damage. I looked through the driver's side window. No one. Back seat. Empty. But the dashboard lights were blinking faintly, even though the engine was off. And in the rearview mirror, I saw the headless conductor. It happened during my trip through Vietnam. I was making my way south from Hanoi to Ho Chi Minh City, using whatever trains were available. I've always loved old railways. There's something about the sound, the rhythm, the fading charm. One night, I ended up in a small town with a name I still can't pronounce properly. The train station was mostly empty. The signs faded. The tracks cracked with weeds. There was a handwritten schedule pinned to the wall, and at the bottom, something odd had been scribbled in pen. Avoid the last car after midnight. I thought it was a joke. The next train was scheduled for 12:20 a.m. I boarded without much thought and found the last car nearly empty. One other guy was dozing near the back, face turned toward the window. The train started moving, and I leaned my head back, watching the countryside slip away under the moonlight. About 30 minutes into the ride, the lights inside the train flickered. Not unusual for these older models. But then, things got strange. The sound of footsteps echoed down the aisle, a slow, deliberate pace. I looked up, expecting a conductor doing a ticket check. Sure enough, a man in a faded uniform was walking toward me, gloved hands clasped in front. But something was off. He was tall, too tall, and as he stepped into the overhead light, I realized he had no head. Just a collar, an empty space where his neck should have been. I froze. He kept walking. The gloved hand reached into a small leather pouch at his waist and pulled out a punch tool. He held it toward me, as if expecting a ticket. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I fumbled with my bag and handed him the stub from earlier. He took it, or rather, the hand took it. No hesitation. Punch. Clean. Precise. Then he handed it back, turned, and walked down the aisle. When I looked at the other passenger, he was gone. No trace he'd ever been there. Just an empty seat and a faint smudge on the window. I got up and followed the conductor, barely 5 seconds after he'd passed. But the aisle was empty. The next car was locked. The door wouldn't budge. I pounded on it, called out. Nothing. I went back to my seat, sweating, heart pounding. I looked at the punch ticket. It had 3 holes in it. I only saw him punch once. The train kept moving, and I sat there, staring at the dark window. And then I saw my reflection. Only it wasn't just me. He was behind me, the conductor, still headless, still holding the punch. The lights flickered, and when they came back, he was gone. The train pulled into the next station around 2 a.m. I got off, shaking. I told the station attendant what I'd seen. He didn't laugh. He just asked, "You sat in the last car?" I nodded. He stared for a long moment and said, "That car was disconnected years ago. It shouldn't even be part of the line anymore." I turned around. The last car was gone. Only 8 cars sat on the track. I could have sworn there were 9 when I got on. I still have the ticket. It's framed on my wall. 3 perfect holes. And the date printed on it? A year before I ever boarded that train. The return shadow. Last winter, I took a trip to Morocco, mostly for the colors, the markets, the food. I stayed in Marrakesh for a while, then decided to venture deeper into the country, away from the crowds. A local driver offered to take me to a small village in the desert. "Old place," he said. "Quiet. Good for photographs." And it was. The village was a scattering of sun-faded houses, barely anyone in sight. I wandered through its narrow alleys, snapping pictures. Doors, windows, stray cats. At the edge of the village was a crumbling wall overlooking a canyon. I took a photo of my shadow on that wall, long and sharp under the afternoon sun. Later, back at the riad, I flipped through my photos. One of them stopped me cold. It was the shot of my shadow. But there were 2 shadows, mine and another, standing beside me. a few inches taller, shoulders broader. And where my arms were at my sides, the second shadow's arms were reaching out, just slightly. I convinced myself it was an optical trick, an overlap from a nearby rock maybe. I deleted the photo. But the next morning, when I went through my phone again, it was back. Same photo, same two shadows, only now the second shadow was closer. I tried deleting it again. This time, it vanished completely. I told myself to forget it. It was just some glitch. That night, I dreamed I was back at the wall. The sun was gone. Everything was gray. I stood facing my own shadow, and across from me, in perfect silence, something stood where the second shadow had been. It had my shape, but it didn't move when I did. It stared at me without eyes. And just before I woke up, it tilted its head slightly, as if listening. When I returned home, I didn't think about it much. A strange travel memory, nothing more. Until a week later, I was brushing my teeth when I noticed it. My shadow on the bathroom wall lagged. I moved. It followed, half a second too late. I tried again. Same delay. Then the worst part, it smiled. My face was neutral, but the shadow's mouth curled upward. I stopped sleeping well. I started filming myself, tracking my shadow's movements in mirrors, on sidewalks, on the walls of my apartment. Every now and then, it would fall out of sync, just for a second, just enough to remind me that something followed me back. I stopped posting online, stopped going out at night. The light in my apartment stays on 24/7, because sometimes, when the lights are off and I'm turning to leave a room, I hear footsteps that aren't mine, and I see something just at the edge of my vision. A second shadow, waiting, always a step behind, the face at the top of the 100 steps. When I was visiting Japan last spring, I spent a few days in a quiet town far from the major cities. It was the kind of place where the streets fall silent after sunset, and the air smells like wet stone and incense. I was staying at a small inn run by an old woman who spoke almost no English, but she was kind and always left tea out for me at night. On my second evening, I went out for a walk. The locals had told me about a place called the 100-Step Stairway. It led from the base of a wooded hill up to a tiny, abandoned shrine. They said it was a local curiosity, something people avoided after dark. Of course, that made me want to see it. It took some time to find. The stairway was hidden between overgrown hedges, moss-covered and uneven, but I counted as I climbed. 1, 2, 3. The higher I went, the quieter everything became. No wind, no insects, no distant city hum. Just my breath and the crunch of my boots. Around the 70th step, I noticed something strange. The stone handrail was cracked in several places, and a deep gouge ran along the left wall, as if something had been dragged up. I kept going. At step 95, I started to feel cold, not chilly, cold, as if I had stepped into a freezer. My breath fogged. I could see my shadow in the dim moonlight, but it looked distorted, stretched. Step 98, step 99, step 100. And then I looked up. At the very top of the stairs was the shrine. Small, weathered, unremarkable. But above it, in the trees, I saw a face. Pale, upside down, hanging just slightly into the light. The features were twisted, not with pain, but with something else. Joy. It was smiling. Its mouth was too wide. Its eyes were fixed directly on mine. I froze. My legs wouldn't move. And then, without a sound, the face tilted further, as if crawling down from the treetops. I turned and ran. I don't remember how I got down those steps. I just remember hearing no footsteps behind me. Nothing. But the cold never left my back, as if the air itself were following. Back at the inn, I told the old woman what I'd seen. She didn't answer. She just stared at me. Then she asked, in broken English, "Did you count the steps?" I nodded. 100. She looked down at her hands. There are only 99. I returned to the stairway the next morning. The path was blocked by a wooden gate I hadn't seen before. A handwritten sign hung from it. I couldn't read it, but I took a photo. Later, I showed it to a friend who could read Japanese. It said, "The 100th step is not yours. Do not look up. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I feel like I'm climbing again, step by step. And somewhere, just before I reach the top, I feel it waiting, smiling, the drowning path." I left home at the same time I always did, 7:18 a.m. The air was cold and wet, and fog clung low to the canals, swallowing rooftops and softening the glow of the street lamps. Everything felt slower, muted. My bike tires ticked quietly over the bricks as I moved through the narrow streets. Houses drifted past like ghosts themselves, their curtains still drawn, chimneys inactive. It was a weekday, but I hadn't passed a single person. The usual route to school was a comfortable routine. I could take it half asleep. Turn left at the cafe, pedal past the bakery with the blue awning, and cut across the footbridge over the East Canal. I liked that bridge. It creaked a little, but it was solid. Wooden. Old, but familiar. That morning, though, the bridge looked different. I didn't notice at first. I was riding slowly, fighting the wind. But when I reached the edge of the canal, something made me stop. I don't know why. There was no sound, no reason. I just froze at the edge of the bridge. It wasn't broken. It hadn't collapsed. But it looked wet. The planks were slick and swollen, darker than usual, like they'd been soaked for days. The metal bolts glistened with something that wasn't rain. Still, I rolled forward, one foot down, then the other. As my front tire touched the first board, I heard it. A second step, but not behind me, beneath. I stopped moving. The air tightened. No ducks, no bikes, just me. And the sound of footsteps under the bridge. I crouched slightly and looked down between the wooden slats. The water was dark, barely moving. At first, I saw nothing. Then, just for a moment, I saw legs. Not mine. Bare. Too long. Moving with mine. I stood up so fast I nearly dropped the bike. There was nothing there. Just the canal. Just the fog. I should have turned back. Instead, I kept going. Slowly. One pedal at a time. The bridge creaked. That was normal. But the weight of the sound was off. It didn't match my steps. I was halfway across when something soft brushed my ankle. I looked down. Nothing. But it felt like a hand, cold, damp, barely touching. I pedaled faster. I hit the far side and rolled off onto the path, heart pounding, hands shaking. I looked back. The bridge was empty. No sound. Just fog. I was late for class that day. Couldn't concentrate. Everything felt disconnected. Familiar places seemed off. A classroom door I'd opened 100 times felt like I'd never seen it before. At lunch, I joined my friends at our usual table. I sat next to someone I'd known since we were kids, Jonas. We always sat together, but I couldn't remember anything about him. His birthday, his last name, even what his voice sounded like. I went home early, claimed I felt sick. The truth was, I couldn't stop thinking about that moment on the bridge, when I looked down and saw legs moving under mine, shadowy, flickering just below the surface, like they were watching me through the planks. I checked my phone that night. I'd taken a picture of the canal from the bridge, like I often did, but it wasn't there. Not deleted, not moved. It just never existed. There was a new photo, though. One I didn't remember taking. It was blurry, dark, but I could make out the edge of the canal, the bridge behind it. And in the water, half submerged, something that looked like a face, eyes wide open, mouth slightly open too. The skin was stretched too tight, too pale. It was looking up. The next day, I didn't take the bridge. I looped around the long way, through the main square, and past the church. It added 15 minutes, but I didn't care. Still, something followed me. I'd turn corners and hear a splash behind me. Not loud, just enough to make me glance back. Nothing was ever there. 3 days later, I found wet footprints on my doorstep. Small, bare. No one in my family said anything. I cleaned them up before school. But that night, I woke up and found a puddle at the base of my bed. The water was clean, clear, but it smelled like algae and rust. Last week, I passed the bridge again. I didn't cross it. I just stood at the edge. It looked normal, dry, safe even. But I noticed something strange. There was no reflection, not in the water, not mine, not the buildings, nothing, just black. Like the water wasn't water anymore, more like a hole. I haven't crossed that bridge since. I still bike the long way. I avoid that street if I can. I've tried to forget what I saw, what I felt. But every few nights, I wake up to the sound of dripping and the shadows on my bedroom wall. They don't move like mine. The missing room. I wasn't supposed to be alone. My research group had split up to survey different wings of the ruined castle. It was part of a university field program in South Bohemia. 2 weeks exploring the foundations of medieval architecture, documenting layout anomalies and construction techniques. The castle had no official name anymore. Locals just called it the Grey Keep. It stood alone in the hills, its roof caved in, vines tangled across stone like veins on decaying skin. My assigned section was the eastern wing. It was the most damaged, which probably explained why nobody else wanted it. But I liked the quiet. I liked the dark corners and the brittle sound of my own footsteps. That's when I found the blueprint. It was folded and stuffed between two stones in a collapsed window frame, yellowed and cracking. It looked like a floor plan, rooms marked by numbers and lines drawn in red ink. I traced it with my finger, noting the outline of the eastern wing. One room stood out. Room 31. I checked my own notes. That number wasn't listed. In fact, the rooms in the eastern wing only went up to 28. At first, I assumed it was a mistake, an outdated plan. But something about the paper, its thickness, the handwriting, told me it was more recent than the rest of the building, almost modern. I decided to look for it. The layout placed room 31 between a narrow hallway and the remains of an old stairwell. When I reached that section, I found only a blank wall, crumbling stone, no doorway. I was about to give up when I noticed something. The floor, the footprints, mine. There were more than just mine. Faint scuffs in the dust led straight to the wall. Shoes, boots, some heavy, some light. All of them stopped at the same spot, where room 31 should have been. I reached out and touched the wall. It was cold, not like stone, more like metal that had sat untouched for hours in a freezer. Then something shifted. A breeze, maybe. Except there was no window nearby. A sound followed, like a click, a lock. Then the wall opened. It was seamless, like a panel sliding sideways, revealing a narrow passage just wide enough for one person. The air that poured out smelled stale, old, like books left underwater. I should have stopped there, but I stepped inside. It didn't feel like the rest of the castle. The walls were smoother, darker. There were no cobwebs, no fallen beams or graffiti, and no windows. I held up my flashlight. The beam barely cut through the dark, like the air itself swallowed light. Room 31 was larger than I expected. Square, maybe 20 feet across. At the far end, a chair sat alone in the center of the room. A simple wooden chair, facing the wall. I thought maybe someone had placed it there for effect. A prank, maybe. But there were no footsteps in the dust leading to it. None but mine. As I took a step forward, something cracked behind me. I turned. The door had vanished. No seam, no outline, just stone again. My flashlight flickered. When it came back on, the chair was facing me. I hadn't heard it move. My throat went dry. I tried to laugh, to make myself believe it was nothing. Then I noticed something in the corner. A mirror, not an antique. A clean, square mirror nailed to the wall. The only thing in the room that looked new. I moved toward it slowly. And when I looked in, I saw the chair. Empty. Except I wasn't in the reflection. The room was there. The chair. But not me. Just the outline of something tall, hunched, standing behind where I should have been. I spun around. Nothing. But the flashlight beam wavered. The air felt heavy, like something was breathing behind me, so close I could almost feel skin without contact. And then, the mirror began to fog. From the inside, I backed up toward the wall, heart pounding. I slammed my hand against the stone where the door had been. It wouldn't budge. Then the lights in the room, what little ambient glow remained, dimmed, not flickered, just sank into something darker. The mirror cracked, a single fracture down the middle, and then I saw something move in the reflection. It stepped forward, out of the shadows. Not a person, not even a shape I can really describe, but it walked, slowly, toward where I stood. The moment it reached the mirror, my flashlight died. I didn't move. I couldn't. Something passed by my arm, a whisper of cold, like cloth brushing skin. But nothing touched me. When I opened my eyes again, I was outside the castle, lying on the grass, dirt under my nails, blood on my sleeve. The others said they'd searched for me for hours. They thought I'd left early. I never told them what happened. I didn't keep the blueprint. It was gone. But I remember room 31. And sometimes, when I turn a corner or look down a hallway, I feel it. That door. Still there. Waiting. The left foot. The night I first saw the foot, the dogs wouldn't stop barking. They howled like something had slithered into the village, something unseen but felt by every living creature. I thought it was just another wild animal, maybe a hyena coming too close, or a leopard sniffing the livestock pens. But when I stepped outside, flashlight in hand, the beam caught something on the ground just before the edge of the path to my house. It was a foot, a single, severed left foot. I stood frozen, the light shaking slightly in my hand. The skin was tough, dark and mottled, calloused like it had belonged to a large animal, perhaps a wildebeest, or maybe a kudu. But it wasn't any animal I could name. It was too clean, too deliberate in the way it had been left, toes pointing directly at my door. I didn't touch it, just stared for a while. Then I went back inside, locked the door, and told myself it wasn't my problem. But that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't sleep. The barking eventually stopped, but I started hearing something else. Not loud, faint, distant, like the tapping of bare feet on packed earth. I sat up, listening. The sound came and went, never steady, like something pacing, but never coming closer. The next morning, the foot was gone. I would have told someone, anyone, but what would I say? A foot came to visit me? They'd laugh. Or worse, they'd nod too seriously, like they already knew what it meant. I wasn't ready for either response. I kept quiet. 2 days passed. Then old Elias died. No one was surprised. He was 83 and hadn't spoken in months. His daughter found him in his chair, still and quiet, his face more relaxed than it had been in years. No one cried. But that night, I heard the sound again. It was closer. The soft, irregular pat-pat of something walking barefoot across dry soil. I checked the windows, the doors. Nothing. No dogs barked, no wind. But I didn't sleep. The next morning, I found the foot again. Same shape, same size, same position. This time, a little closer to the door. I called my cousin Kamo, who lived a few kilometers away. I didn't mention the foot, just said I needed help with a plumbing issue, something to get him over. When he arrived, I casually pointed at the ground and asked if he saw anything unusual. He looked. He saw nothing. "It's clean," he said. "What am I looking for?" The foot was gone. Again. That evening, I walked the edge of the village, passing thorn trees and rusted wire fences. Every shadow looked too long. Every bird call felt like a warning. I kept expecting to hear it. Pat, pat, soft and uneven. But the night was silent. Still, when I got home, I locked every door and shoved a heavy bench against the front entrance. I dreamt of feet, 100 of them, running, limping, crawling across the dry plains, all left feet. I woke up to silence, but when I opened the door, there it was. Not outside, inside, right on the welcome mat. I didn't scream, just stood there and stared. The foot looked older now, like it had dried out, the skin cracking, almost wooden, but the nails were clean, the heel still moist, as if it had walked through something just moments before. I picked it up. I don't know why. Maybe I thought if I held it, I could prove to myself it was real. It was cold, heavy, and it didn't smell of rot, just earth. I threw it into the fire pit behind my house. It didn't burn. The flames licked it, blackened it, but never consumed it. After 2 hours, I gave up. I buried it in the dirt, 1/2 meter down, covered it with stones. That night, I didn't sleep. At 2:14 a.m., I heard it again. Pat. Pause. Pat, pat. Pause. Inside the house. Not pacing, not wandering, just standing still. I waited under the blankets, heart pounding. After an hour, it stopped. The next morning, the stones in the yard had been moved. The dirt was disturbed. The foot was gone. 3 days passed. Then Daniel from the hardware store collapsed behind his counter. He wasn't sick. He wasn't old. Just dead. No signs of struggle. No marks. The doctor from the city said it was the heart. Happens sometimes, she shrugged. But I heard the sounds again that night, and the night after. Each time, a little louder, a little closer. I stopped answering the phone, stopped going outside after dark. Neighbors came to check on me, but I told them I was tired, sick, not myself. They nodded, concerned but polite. No one offered to stay. No one looked me in the eye. I thought of leaving, packing a bag, getting on the road, heading to Cape Town, or even farther. But the idea felt stupid, as if the thing would just follow. The foot didn't want a place, it wanted a person. Last night, I heard it again, but not walking, not pacing. It was standing in the kitchen. I knew, because I heard the spoon I'd left on the counter fall to the floor. Not crash, just drop, like it had been nudged. I didn't get up. I didn't move. I waited until morning. When the light came, I stood and walked into the kitchen. Nothing. But I saw something on the floor. A smudge. A perfect print. Left foot. I don't hear it right now, but I know it's near. I haven't heard my own footsteps all day. Not on the floor. Not on the stairs. Not when I walk. Only silence. I don't know when it'll happen, but I think I understand now. When the foot visits you, it's not coming for your life. It's coming for your steps. And once it takes them, you won't need them anymore. Handkerchief. I wasn't looking for anything special, when I stepped into that tiny vintage shop in the 18th arrondissement. Paris was wet that day, one of those gray afternoons where the sky can't decide whether to drizzle or pour. I ducked in just to get out of the rain. The store was narrow and dimly lit, the scent of old fabric and dust filling the air like forgotten perfume. It was the kind of place you pass 100 times and never notice. Racks of coats, drawers full of gloves, shelves stacked with tarnished jewelry and lace. I wandered through lazily, fingers brushing textures, eyes scanning for nothing in particular. Then I saw it. A handkerchief. It was folded neatly in a glass case near the register. Pale blue, almost silver, with delicate embroidery along the edges. Tiny white roses, each one perfect. It wasn't flashy. In fact, it was easy to miss. But something about it felt untouched, as if it had waited for me. I asked the shopkeeper about it. He was an older man, nearly bald, with round glasses and a wool vest that looked as old as the merchandise. He barely glanced at the case when I pointed. "Ah, yes," he said in a quiet voice, almost distracted. "One of a kind. Not many notice it." I bought it for 10 euros. It was still raining when I left, but lighter now, misty and soft. I walked back to my apartment on Rue de Belleville, clutching the little paper bag like it held something fragile. It was silly, I know, just a handkerchief. But I liked the weight of it in my coat pocket. That night, I placed it on my bedside table. And that was when it started. The first time, it was subtle. I was brushing my teeth, the hum of the electric toothbrush filling the small bathroom. I looked into the mirror, as I always did, but for a moment, a fraction of a second, I saw something that shouldn't have been there. A hand, not mine. It moved across the mirror, dabbing at something unseen on its cheek, as if wiping away tears. Then it was gone. I stood still, foam clinging to my lips, staring at my reflection. Nothing out of place. No strange shadows. No lingering movement. I told myself it was stress. A trick of the light. An eyelash in my eye. The next night, it happened again. This time, I was washing my face. The bathroom steamed from the hot water, and I rubbed a towel over my cheeks, looked up, and there it was. A hand. Thin, pale, but clearly female, moving slowly, dabbing at invisible tears. The movement was fluid, deliberate, not mine. Again, it vanished before I could react. I backed away from the mirror, heart pounding. The room felt suddenly smaller, too quiet. I turned on all the lights and sat awake in the living room for hours, the handkerchief still folded neatly beside my bed. I didn't touch it. Over the next few days, I tried to forget. I stayed out longer, worked later, even slept on the couch. But every time I passed a reflective surface, mirrors, windows, even the dark screen of the television, I watched. And sometimes I saw it again. Always the same motion. A hand, wiping tears. Never a face, never a sound. Just the slow, mournful gesture, and only in reflections. I moved the handkerchief to a drawer, then to a box, then wrapped it in cloth and shoved it under the bed. It didn't help. In fact, it got worse. One night, I woke up to the sound of dripping water. I followed it to the bathroom. The faucet was dry, the floor was dry, but the mirror was wet, not fogged. wet, like something had been pressed against it. There were smears, faint fingerprints, and a single perfect circle, like a teardrop. I cleaned it, scrubbed until the glass was clear. The next night, I saw the hand again. This time, it didn't disappear. It moved slowly, wiping, then stopped. It stayed there, still, pressed against the inside of the mirror. I stared. My reflection was gone, only the hand. I turned away, left the room, sat in the kitchen with all the lights on until dawn. When I returned, the mirror was normal, but I didn't feel normal. I began noticing changes. The handkerchief, though hidden, never gathered dust. It always looked freshly washed, as if it had been laundered moments before. Once, I found it folded on the bed, even though I hadn't touched it in days. I tried throwing it away, but it came back, tucked neatly into the drawer beside my socks. Then came the dreams. Always the same. A woman standing in front of a mirror, weeping silently. She never turned, never spoke. But in every dream, she held the handkerchief. My handkerchief. I began to forget things. Conversations, appointments. My friends stopped calling. My mother's voice on the phone became a blur of concern and static. I stopped answering. The apartment grew cold, not in temperature, but in mood. The lights felt dimmer. My own reflection began to blur at the edges. Sometimes, I wasn't sure if I was looking at myself at all. One night, I covered every mirror in the apartment, every reflective surface, blankets, tape, even cardboard. I unplugged the television, turned all the frames around. For a day or two, it was quiet, peaceful. Then I walked past a window at dusk, and there she was, a figure, thin, dressed in pale blue, holding something to her face. I couldn't see her features, but I knew the handkerchief. I stayed inside after that, kept the blinds shut, stopped going to work. Food piled up in the fridge, uneaten. I couldn't sleep, couldn't think, only watched, waited. The hand returned, first in the bathroom mirror, then in the hallway, the kitchen, the black screen of my laptop. Always the same motion, slow, wiping tears, over and over and over. Last night, I woke up at 3:17 a.m. Something was in the room. I couldn't see it, but the air was heavy, the way it gets before a thunderstorm. I turned my head slowly, and there it was. Not in the mirror, not in the window, but beside the bed. A shape, faint, flickering, like smoke in human form. And then, a hand reached out. It held the handkerchief. I closed my eyes. When I opened them, it was gone. But the handkerchief was in my hand, still damp. Today, I tried to return it to the shop. I walked through the rain, down the narrow street, past the same buildings. But the shop wasn't there. I searched for hours. Nothing. Just blank walls. Empty spaces. No sign of the store. No sign of the man behind the counter. Just the city moving around me. Indifferent. I'm home now. Every mirror is uncovered. I've stopped running. Tonight, she'll come again. I know it, and this time, I won't look away. Postcard. I got home from Brazil late on a Monday night. The flight was long, 12 hours from São Paulo to Frankfurt, then another layover, and a short hop to Berlin. My neck was stiff, my bag heavier than I remembered, and all I wanted was a hot shower and sleep that didn't come in plastic seats or against airplane windows. The apartment smelled like it always did after a trip. Closed air, dust, and something faintly metallic. I dropped my suitcase by the door, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed into bed without even turning on the lights. The next morning, I made coffee, answered emails, and ignored the mountain of laundry staring at me from the suitcase. When I went to check the mailbox, there was only one thing inside: a postcard. It showed a beach, a curve of pale sand lined by thick palms and blue-green water so vivid it looked fake. On the back, in quick, messy handwriting, it read, "I'll go again." That was it. No dear, no name, no signature. But I knew the handwriting. It was mine. At first, I thought maybe I'd written it while I was there and forgotten. A drunk moment? A joke? But I never bought postcards in Brazil, and certainly never mailed any. I checked the stamp. It was postmarked 3 days from now. March 31st. Today was March 28th. I turned the card over again, looked for any sign of a trick. Bad printing, a joke from a friend, maybe a timed delivery. But the ink was real. The pen had bled a little into the paper. I even scratched at the stamp to see if it had been glued recently. It was sealed firm. The address was mine. I stared at it for a while, then left it on the table and tried to pretend it didn't matter. But it did. By the afternoon, the beach on the postcard started to bother me. I couldn't remember seeing it in Brazil. Not once. I'd mostly stayed inland, hiking, staying in little hostels, a few nights in São Paulo. The only beach I saw was far from this postcard-perfect scene. I tried reverse image searching it. Nothing. That night, I dreamed of the beach. I was standing ankle-deep in warm water, the sky overcast but bright, the wind gentle. Something moved in the trees behind me. I didn't look, just stood there, waiting. When I woke, my feet were cold. I checked the apartment. Everything locked. No signs of entry. But the front door felt touched, like it had been opened and closed gently, just once. I told myself I was being paranoid. By March 29th, I'd put the postcard in a drawer, out of sight. I went back to work, met friends for coffee, tried to get back to normal. But that night, the dream came again. Same beach, same light. But now, I was holding something. A postcard. I didn't turn it over. I woke up with sand in my sheets. Just a little, but enough. I don't live near a beach. By March 30th, I'd stopped sleeping. Something was coming. I could feel it, not in a supernatural sense, but the way you feel weather changing. The way the air presses on your skin before a storm. I checked the drawer. The postcard was still there, but now it smelled faintly of salt. March 31st, the day on the postmark. I stayed home from work, didn't eat, didn't answer messages. I sat at the kitchen table watching the postcard, waiting for something. Nothing happened. Until 6:13 p.m., a knock at the door. Software. Deliberate. Once. I didn't move. Then again. twice. I stood slowly, heart pounding, looked through the peephole. No one, just the hallway. But on the floor, another postcard. I opened the door slowly, half expecting a prank, a neighbor, something I could laugh off. But the hall was empty. I picked up the card. Same beach, same sand. But this time, the back said, "You already left." I didn't understand. I looked at the date. April 2nd. Another 2 days ahead. I turned the card over. The beach looked different now. The trees were darker, the water less vivid, the sky grayer. I dropped it on the floor. That night, I didn't dream. I didn't sleep. April 1st. I couldn't find the first postcard, the one I put in the drawer. Only the new one remained. It had moved, now on the table, beside my coffee mug. I didn't put it there. I was sure of it. That afternoon, I checked my passport. Inside, tucked between the pages, was a plane ticket. São Paulo to Berlin. Dated April 3rd. But I'd already come back, hadn't I? I flipped through photos on my phone. Nothing after March 26th. No return flight. No airport selfies. No pictures from home. The last photo was of a bus window, trees blurring past, somewhere in Brazil. I checked my texts. Nothing about being back. No, just landed. No, back home safe. I opened my suitcase. Still packed. Still sealed. Still locked with the little plastic tag from São Paulo Customs. My heart stopped. I hadn't opened it. I hadn't unpacked. But I remembered being back. I remembered lying in my bed, drinking coffee, holding the postcard. Had I dreamed it? No. I'd lived it. I had. Hadn't I? The knock came again. 6:13 p.m. Same sound. I opened the door before the second knock. No one. Just another card. Same beach. Now nearly dusk. The waves calmer. The sand smooth. On the back. It's waiting. I don't know what it is. I don't know if I ever left that beach. I don't know what day it is anymore. I've stopped looking at the calendar. The postcards come on their own now. Every night. Sometimes two. I don't remember writing them. But they're all in my handwriting. And each one feels more certain. Tonight said, "You'll remember soon." I think I will. I think I'm already there. I just haven't realized it yet. Breath. The hike wasn't supposed to be difficult. Just a solo weekend trip through a lesser-known trail in the Japanese Alps. Peaceful, quiet, the kind of thing I used to do when life in the city got too loud. I took the early train, packed light, and started the climb around 9 a.m. The sky was clear, the path well marked, and there wasn't a soul in sight. Perfect. By early afternoon, I was deep into the forest, the canopy above turning the sun into shifting, dappled light. I stopped for water at a mossy outcrop, feeling that pleasant ache in my legs, the kind that says you're far from everything. That's when it happened. A tap. Light. precise, on my left shoulder. I thought maybe a branch had fallen or a large insect had landed. But when I turned my head, no one. I was alone. I laughed it off, told myself it was nerves. I'd been hiking alone long enough to know the mind plays tricks in the quiet. Still, something about the sensation lingered. It hadn't felt like a twig or a falling leaf. It felt intentional. I picked up my pack and kept going. But for the rest of the climb, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was just behind me, not following me, not stalking, just close, hovering, like someone was walking too close in a narrow hallway, breathing. That night, I camped at a clearing near the summit. I set up my tent, cooked some instant noodles, and watched the sky fade to indigo. The air was thin and cold, but still, until I heard it, a breath, right beside my left ear. I turned so fast I nearly fell over. Nothing. No wind. No trees moving. Just that sudden absence of sound, like something had been there a second ago and slipped away the moment I noticed. I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt it, not touching me, just there. The sense of weight beside my shoulder, warm air brushing the side of my neck, always just left of center. I packed up at dawn without breakfast and started down. I thought it would stop once I left the mountain. I told myself it was just altitude, exhaustion, maybe even a fever. But the breath followed me down the slope, past the trees, onto the bus, back into town, into the train, all the way home. That was 2 weeks ago. It hasn't stopped. Every moment of every day, I feel it. A presence, small but dense, like a breath that never ends, caught just before an exhale. It never moves, never speaks. It doesn't touch me, but it's always there, just above my left shoulder. I tried everything. Doctors, therapists, even MRIs. Stress, they said. Overwork. No abnormalities. No hallucinations. But it's real. I feel it when I lie in bed, turned on my right side. The air brushes the back of my neck, warm and moist, like someone leaning in close. I feel it when I shower. No matter how hot the water, there's always that patch of skin left cool, untouched. I stopped going out. People started asking questions. I couldn't explain that I haven't had a silent moment in weeks. Not truly silent, because the breath is always there. I tried ignoring it. That only made it worse. Once, I screamed at it, told it to go away. That night, I woke up with bruises on my shoulder. Small, round, like fingertips. I tried recording it, left a mic on all night beside my pillow. 8 hours of static, except once. At 3:41 a.m., there's a sound, a slow, deep inhale, right next to the microphone. Then nothing. I played it over and over. I didn't sleep for 2 days after that. Sometimes, I wonder if it wants something, but it never acts, never shows itself. It only waits, breathes. Once, I caught my reflection in a window. I wasn't looking directly, just passing by. And I saw it. A smudge, a faint outline, the shape of a mouth near my shoulder. Gone the moment I turned. I've stopped using mirrors. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't turned around on that trail. If I'd just ignored the tap, would I be free now? I'll never know. All I do know is this: wherever I go, it follows. When I sit, it hovers. When I walk, it floats just behind. And when I sleep, it leans closer, breathing, breathing, breathing. Bench. I used to go there to think. By the lake, in the park. There's this one bench right near the edge, a little off the main path, where the trees thin out and the water comes almost right up to the grass. I don't know why I liked it so much. It wasn't special. Just wood and metal, half-rusted bolts holding it together. But it felt quiet, safe. I started going there every evening after work. Late, usually past 8. The tourists were gone by then, and the families with their strollers and dogs had cleared out. Just me, the lake, the trees, and the wind. And the bench. It overlooked a gentle curve in the shoreline where the water was calmer, almost still. Sometimes I'd bring a thermos of coffee. Sometimes I'd just sit. I didn't even listen to music, just the soft lapping of water and the occasional rustle in the trees behind me. I never saw anything strange. Not for the first few weeks. Not until one night in early October. The air was already turning crisp, and the park was colder than usual. Mist hovered low over the water, curling around the rocks near the edge. I remember breathing out and watching the fog of my breath mix with the lake mist. That's when I saw the face, not in the water itself, under the bench. At first, it didn't register. I glanced down absent-mindedly, maybe expecting to see a squirrel or a raccoon. But what I saw, just barely visible beneath the slats, was the pale shape of a face, eyes wide open, not blinking. It was watching me. I stood up immediately. My heart thumped, but I forced myself to look again. Nothing. Just the empty space under the bench. Maybe a trick of the light, I told myself. A reflection? Maybe a piece of litter. Something white catching the mist. I even got down on one knee, peered underneath. Dry dirt, a few leaves, no water, nothing else. I didn't stay long after that. The next day, I came back earlier. Sun still up, people still around. I sat on the bench. Nothing felt wrong. Nothing looked strange. I even checked underneath again. Normal. I went home trying to laugh it off. But I couldn't forget those eyes. The night after, I went again. I had to know. This time, I brought a flashlight. The park was deserted. Cold wind. Water quiet. I sat down. Waited. Nothing. Half an hour passed, and I almost convinced myself it had been a dream. I even felt a little foolish. Then I heard it. A drip. Not from the trees. Not rain. Just one. Deliberate plop. Like something slipping into the water. I leaned forward, turned the flashlight on, shined it under the bench, and there it was again. A face, not pressed up against the bench, but submerged, as if beneath a sheet of glass. The eyes wide, lips barely parted, bubbles rising from the nose, like it was drowning, but not moving, just watching. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I stood up fast, nearly dropped the flashlight, and backed away into the trees. When I looked again, the face was gone. I didn't go back for days. But something about it stayed with me. That stillness. The way the face looked too calm, like it belonged there, like it had always been under the bench, waiting for someone to look. I told myself I imagined it, that it was a sleep-deprived hallucination, that it was nothing. But I stopped sleeping anyway, because I started seeing it elsewhere, not full on, just hints, reflections in puddles, car windows, the dark screen of my TV at night, always faint, always half-formed, but always those eyes. Then 3 days later, I woke up with my shoes wet, soaked actually, still tied on my feet, mud on the soles, sand between the laces. I checked the door, locked. No sign of forced entry. I live alone. There was dirt on the doormat and on my keys. I didn't remember leaving, but somehow I had. The next night, I dreamt of the bench, not sitting on it, lying beneath it, my face against the cold earth. The lake stretched out in front of me, and just beyond it, something looking back, its face half submerged, eyes wide, silent. I woke up gasping, shoes wet again. This time, I found sand in my bed. I stopped going to the park. Didn't help. Because now, I hear water. Dripping. Even when the taps are off. Even when I'm nowhere near the sink. Just faint splashes, like footsteps through puddles. And sometimes, I smell algae. The faint scent of wet stone and lake rot. In my hallway. In my closet. And I still dream. Always the same. The bench, the shore, the face. Closer each time. Last night, I woke up with my phone in my hand. The photo app was open. A picture of the bench. Taken from ground level. From underneath. I checked the timestamp. 2:47 a.m. I checked the weather app. Light rain, 4 degrees Celsius. I don't own a raincoat, but my hoodie was wet. The soles of my shoes were caked in lake mud. And the last photo in my gallery, one I didn't take, was a close-up. A face. Not mine. Not quite human. Just eyes. Wide. Waiting. I don't know what it wants. I don't know why it chose me. But I know it's not just in the park anymore. The bench may still be there. Quiet. Innocent in daylight. But whatever's beneath it, it followed me home. Suspended. I used to walk past it every day on my way home from work. The suspended monorail, once a marvel of engineering, now just another relic waiting for demolition. In Wuppertal, Germany, the Schwebebahn hangs like a giant metal skeleton over the river and streets. Most of it is still operational. Most of it. But one line, a small extension that veered off toward the industrial district, had been shut down after a structural inspection nearly 2 years ago. They left one of the cars hanging, still attached to the overhead rail, swaying gently in the wind like a wind chime with weight. It sat directly over a narrow service road that no one used, boxed in by decaying warehouses and chain-link fences. The car was locked. The power disconnected. I know, because I checked. I'm a maintenance engineer. At least I was. I've never told anyone what happened. Not fully. I've written some of it down, deleted it, rewritten it. Maybe this time, I'll leave it. Maybe this time, someone will understand. It started with a light. a soft glow I noticed out of the corner of my eye one night while passing the abandoned car. It was nearly 11 p.m. I'd worked late, and I was cutting through the service road for the first time in months. I looked up and saw it, just a flicker, then darkness again. I thought maybe it was a trick of the street lamps bouncing off the windows, but the next night, I saw it again. And the next, a pale, steady light from inside the car, as if someone had turned on a ceiling panel or a phone screen. The vehicle wasn't connected to any power. We'd cut it ourselves. Curious, I asked around at the depot. Battery malfunction, someone said. Reflection, another guessed. No one's been up there in ages. They dismissed it. So I checked the footage. There was still a security camera mounted across from the junction, mostly for insurance purposes. I pulled the logs for the last 7 days and fast-forwarded through each night. At 2:36 a.m., the light came on. Exactly 2:36. Every night. It stayed on for 11 minutes, then vanished. There was no sign of movement inside, just that quiet glow, like someone sitting alone under a dome light. I requested access to the car. They said no, safety concerns. The structure was sound, but old. Accessing it required a harness, scaffolding, keys, bureaucracy. So I went alone. One night, a week after I first saw the light, I returned at 2:20 a.m. with a ladder, a borrowed key from the old depot master, and a portable light clipped to my jacket. At 2:34, I was standing under the car. At 2:36, the light came on. It wasn't faint anymore. It filled the whole car, soft and sterile like hospital lighting. I climbed fast, heart racing. The door wasn't locked. It opened with a soft click. Inside, the air was colder. I stepped in. Empty seats. Silent. No dust. No cobwebs. Too clean. The light buzzed faintly above me. I stepped carefully between the rows. The windows were fogged, but not from condensation. From the inside. Like breath had stained the glass. That's when I saw it. A shape. Seated at the far end of the car. Not moving. Facing the window. I froze. My brain stuttered, trying to explain it. A mannequin? A trick of shadows? But the air felt wrong. Heavy. The way it does just before a power outage or a storm. I turned off my light. Silence. Then a sound. Breathing. I stepped back. Slowly. My foot hit the base of a seat, and the metal groaned louder than it should have. The figure shifted, not turning, just adjusting, still facing the window. I didn't stay. I backed out of the car, closed the door behind me, and climbed down as fast as I dared. I don't remember the walk home. I don't remember unlocking my door. I remember not sleeping. The next day, I returned, in daylight, with 2 co-workers. The car was empty. No sign anyone had been there. The light didn't work. The interior was dusty, just like you'd expect from years of disuse. But I found something. A handprint on the inside of the window. High up, right where the shape had been seated. Not a fresh one. Pressed deep. Long. Like the hand had stayed there for a very long time. That night, I didn't go back, but I checked the camera feed the next morning. 2:36 a.m. The light came on and stayed on for 11 minutes. The same duration, the same glow. The next night, I stayed home, and my phone vibrated at 2:36. No caller, just a notification. Storage full. When I checked, the gallery was filled with photos. Dozens, all taken within seconds. Every single one from inside the monorail car. Empty seats, foggy windows, and at the very end, in the last image, the shape. Closer now. Not facing the window anymore. Facing the camera. I threw the phone across the room. The next morning, it was gone. Wiped. Photos deleted. Storage normal. No backup. But I still see it. In my dreams. In the corners of bus windows. Reflected in glass buildings. Sitting. Waiting. Always at the edge of my vision. It doesn't move. It doesn't speak. It only watches. I quit my job last month. I moved to another city. Far from the monorail. Far from that car. But at night, always at 2:36, I wake up. And for 11 minutes, I hear the faint hum of fluorescent light and the silence of someone watching me, waiting to face the window again. Bell. I first heard about the school while visiting my cousin in northern Thailand. He was a contractor, hired to inspect a series of old government buildings scheduled for demolition. One of them was a primary school, abandoned for years, sitting at the edge of a rice field just outside Lampang. He joked about how creepy it felt. Like it's waiting for something, he said over dinner, half laughing, half serious. Then he asked if I wanted to see it. I said yes. I don't know why. Maybe I was bored. Maybe I was curious. Maybe something about the way he said, waiting, unsettled me just enough to want more. We drove out the next morning. The road narrowed to cracked pavement, then to packed dirt. At the end of it stood the school. Single story. Pale yellow paint faded to beige. The sign out front had lost most of its letters. Grass had overgrown the entrance. The windows were streaked with dust and bird droppings. Inside, the air smelled like wood, rot, and paper. We walked the halls slowly. My cousin pointed out damage, water stains on the ceiling, broken tiles, sagging doors, but I barely listened. The building felt wrong, not dangerous, not haunted even, just paused, like it hadn't realized everyone had left. We stepped into a classroom at the far end of the corridor. Desks stacked in one corner. A chalkboard still faintly marked with long faded writing. Sunlight filtered through the high windows, cutting long shadows across the floor. And then it rang. A school bell. High-pitched, sharp, clear. Just once. I froze. My cousin didn't even flinch. "You okay?" he asked. "You didn't hear that?" He blinked. "Hear what?" "The bell. Just now. It rang." He shook his head. "No, it didn't." I looked at my phone. 12 p.m. exactly. We finished the inspection. I didn't mention it again, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Later that night, I searched online. Nothing unusual. No local news, no ghost stories, no urban legends. just the basic listing of a school that had closed 6 years ago due to lack of funding and declining population. The next Friday, I went back. Alone. I parked at the edge of the field and walked the rest of the way in. The heat was worse that day, and the school looked even smaller than I remembered. I stood outside the same classroom, watching the minute tick over on my phone. 11:59, 12 o'clock. It rang. Again, just once. Same sharp note, same length. Not mechanical, not digital. Real. Like an actual bell mounted on the wall. I walked inside. Empty. The desks were still in the corner. The chalkboard still bore the faint outline of an old math lesson. And near the door, above the light switch, was a small metal call bell, like the kind teachers use to signal the end of an activity. No wiring, no battery, no power source, just a bell and silence. I waited for someone, something, to show. Nothing did. But when I left the building and checked my phone again, the photo app was open, and there was a new image. Taken at 12 o'clock exactly. It showed the classroom. Same angle I'd been facing. But there was someone in the photo. A child, barely visible, standing by the chalkboard. I hadn't seen anyone, and I hadn't taken the picture. I told myself it was a bug, a reflection, a glitch. I deleted it. The next Friday, I went back. This time, I set up a small camera on a tripod facing the classroom. It was motion-triggered, time-stamped, battery-powered. I checked it twice before leaving it to record. I waited outside, just down the corridor, watching the seconds tick down. 11:59, 12 o'clock. Nothing. No sound. I checked the camera afterward. At 12:003, the bell rang. Loud and clear, right into the mic. The camera picked it up, but only the sound. No one was in the frame. Nothing moved. The bell didn't shake. No strings. No pressure. Just sound. But the moment the bell stopped, the footage changed. The light in the room dimmed, just slightly. The contrast shifted, and in the bottom corner of the screen, a shape appeared, not walking in, not rising up, appearing, like the image had been overwritten or merged with another. A face, a child's, expressionless, just watching. The bell rang again. My cousin stopped talking to me after that, said I was taking it too far, said maybe the place got into my head, but I had to know. I had to understand. So I did something I shouldn't have. I stayed overnight. I brought a sleeping bag, a flashlight, and 2 cameras. One inside the classroom, one facing the outside window. I sat in the middle of the room, directly beneath the bell. Midnight passed, 2 a.m., then 4. The air got cold. Too cold for Thailand in April. Then came the breathing. Not heavy, just soft, as if someone were asleep nearby. It didn't come from the hallway. It came from inside the classroom. I turned on my flashlight. Nothing. But when I looked up, the bell was moving. Just slightly. Swinging. No sound. I packed my things and left before the sun rose. The next Friday, I didn't go. I didn't want to know anymore. But at 12 p.m., Sitting at a cafe across town, I felt it, a pressure in my ears, like descending in an airplane. And beneath the noise of traffic and voices, just faintly, I heard the bell. Sharp, precise, unmistakable. It's been 4 weeks now, and every Friday at noon, I hear it again. No matter where I am, no one else does. And every time, my phone buzzes. One photo, no notification, just saved silently. Always of the classroom, and each time, the child is closer. Watching, waiting. I don't go back anymore. But I know, next Friday, at noon, the bell will ring again, and this time, the photo won't show the classroom. It'll show me. Silent. I arrived in the village just before dusk. It had taken 5 hours by bus from the city, followed by nearly 2 more in a borrowed jeep along narrow, unpaved roads. The landscape in this part of Mexico is beautiful. Red earth, dense groves of mesquite, mountains smudged into the distance. But the closer I got to the village of El Silencio, the more that beauty felt artificial, like scenery painted over something that didn't want to be seen. The request came through official channels. A rural clinic had filed a medical report marked urgent, flagged by an administrator who noticed a disturbing pattern in the text. Over a dozen cases of sudden aphonia, total loss of voice, over a 3-week span. No apparent injury, no illness, no trauma, just silence. I was sent as the investigating physician. The village was small, maybe 60 people, 70 at most. When I pulled in, no one greeted me. No curious children, no idle old men watching from porches. Just rows of sun-bleached buildings and a single church bell that hadn't rung in years. I parked near the square and stepped out. My boots crunched on gravel. That was the loudest sound. I didn't hear birds. I didn't hear dogs. The silence wasn't peaceful. It pressed in. I made my way to the clinic. It was a squat, 2-room structure with cracked plaster and barred windows. The lights inside were off. The door was unlocked. No one was there. A medical file sat open on the desk. The patient's name was crossed out. The diagnosis section was blank. I flipped through others. Same pattern. Dozens of files. All incomplete. All silent. I spent the first night in the clinic. There was a cot, some emergency food, clean water. I wrote initial notes, observed the surroundings, and I listened. That night, I heard something. Not footsteps, not voices, breath. It came in short, subtle intervals, like someone exhaling just past the window. I turned off the lights, pressed my back to the wall, and waited. After a while, the breath faded, not into silence, but into something stranger. Whispers, but not from a voice. The next day, I met one of the villagers, an old woman, no taller than my chest, watching me from the corner of a nearby alley. She didn't speak, just raised one hand and pointed to her throat, then to the sky. I tried to communicate, but she shook her head, not in frustration, in resignation. Later, I saw others, all silent. They didn't avoid me, but they didn't greet me either. No nods, no waves. They moved slowly, deliberately, like everything was underwater. And none of them spoke, not even in whispers. By the second day, I noticed something else. Their mouths. They barely opened them, even when smiling or chewing or sighing, as though the muscles had atrophied from disuse. I attempted a basic exam on a teenage boy who seemed willing. He let me shine a light into his mouth, check his throat. Vocal cords, normal. No swelling, no paralysis. He could hum faintly if I asked, but he couldn't form words, couldn't raise his voice, couldn't scream. I asked him to write something, anything. He scribbled 2 words on a sheet of paper. It listens. That night, I dreamt I was speaking in a language I didn't understand. Not nonsense, not gibberish. Words, software, rhythmic, almost soothing. But when I woke, my mouth was dry, my tongue numb. I could still speak, but I didn't try. I didn't want to. The 3rd day, I decided to explore the outskirts. The homes became fewer, the trees denser. At the edge of the village, I found a single-room chapel. No cross, no altar, just rows of benches and a large circular mark on the wall. Not painted, burned, as if something hot had pressed against it from the other side. And at the base of that wall, a scattering of bones. Not animal, small, delicate. Fingers. I left immediately. Back at the clinic, I tried to record an update. I sat down with my recorder and pressed the button. I spoke for 7 minutes. When I played it back, the tape was blank. No static, no sound, just silence. That night, I tried to leave. The Jeep wouldn't start. Battery dead, though it had been fine that morning. I packed my bag and decided to walk. I made it less than a kilometer before I realized I was lost. The road had changed, forked where it hadn't forked before. The signs were gone, the stars unfamiliar. And then I heard it. Not behind me, not beside me, inside me. A voice, not in words, in breath. Like something was imitating speech without understanding it. It filled my chest, my head. My tongue felt wrong. I couldn't swallow. I ran. I don't remember how I got back, only that when I opened my eyes again, I was lying on the clinic cot, my shoes covered in red dust, my recorder in my lap, still blank. I tried to scream. Nothing came out. That was 4 days ago. I can't speak now. I haven't seen another villager since I returned. The doors are closed, the windows covered, but I hear it every night, just outside, just beneath the surface of the silence, not walking, not moving, listening. I know now it's not a virus, not an illness. It's something older, something that feeds not on sound, but on the loss of it, and every voice it takes, it keeps. I can hear them sometimes. Not words, not memories, just impressions. Grief, fear, surrender. They're not screaming. They're not calling for help. They're trying to warn me, but they have no voice left to do it. And soon, neither will I. Sleepwalkers. I didn't mean to find the village. I was hiking through the Carpathians, making my way slowly across the Romanian countryside. I'd taken a few weeks off work, hoping to clear my head, maybe disconnect from the noise for a while. I packed light, traveled alone, and stayed off the main roads. That morning had started like any other. Mist curling between the trees, birdsong echoing off the hills. I followed a rough trail for most of the day, but by late afternoon, the path had narrowed, then vanished altogether. I checked my GPS, but the signal had dropped. Just before dusk, I saw rooftops between the trees. A village. It wasn't on any map I'd downloaded. No road signs, no power lines, just wooden homes with steep roofs and shuttered windows, clustered at the base of a hill like they'd grown there. I figured I was lucky. Maybe someone could point me back to the main route, or at least offer a place to sleep. But the first thing I noticed was the silence. No dogs, no chickens, no laughter, just wind. I knocked on the first door. No answer. I knocked again. Nothing. The house wasn't locked, so I opened the door cautiously. Inside, a man sat slumped in a wooden chair by the window. Eyes closed, breathing, not dead, not asleep either. He didn't stir when I entered, didn't flinch when I spoke to him. Just sat there, chest rising and falling slowly, like someone dreaming. I backed out and tried the next house. Same thing. A woman at the kitchen table, hands folded neatly, eyes closed, still. Another house. 3 children curled up on a couch, faces relaxed, all breathing in unison. They were all like that. Every home I checked, dozens of people, breathing, eyes closed, motionless, but not one awake. I should have left. I know that now. But I didn't. Not right away. I camped outside the village, just beyond the tree line. I told myself I'd head out at first light. Probably just some weird regional tradition. Some fasting ritual, maybe. I'd find a ranger or another traveler in the morning. But I didn't sleep well. Around midnight, I heard footsteps. Slow. Shuffling. I unzipped my tent just enough to peek outside. They were walking. The villagers. Hundreds of them. Single file. Eyes still closed. Moving silently through the streets. Like they'd all stood up at once and started drifting. None of them spoke. None opened their eyes. They moved like sleepwalkers. I watched them for over an hour. Then one by one, they returned to their homes, sat or lay down, or resumed whatever position they'd been in before. I waited until morning, packed up fast, tried to retrace my steps back toward the ridge, but the trail I came in on was gone. I tried circling around the village, but no matter which direction I walked, I found myself back near the same wooden sign at the edge of town. A sign with no name. I stayed in the village that day, trying to make sense of it. They never moved. never blinked, never ate or drank, just sat or stood or rested. The sun rose, passed overhead, set, and at night they walked again. More organized this time, in tighter lines, like a procession. I tried recording them, but my phone froze. Wouldn't even open the camera app. I tried shaking them awake. Nothing. They moved if I pushed them, but the moment I let go, they slumped back into place, breathing, always breathing. On the third day, I stopped counting time. It stopped feeling like I was awake at all. I started to hear things. A low hum, like a lullaby I couldn't quite place. It was coming from everywhere and nowhere, whispering from the walls, from the trees, from inside my own chest. I tried screaming. No echo. Tried breaking a window. It cracked, but made no sound. Even my own footsteps stopped making noise. By the fourth night, I stopped resisting. I watched them rise again. Hundreds of villagers, eyes closed, walking in that same gentle rhythm. And this time, without meaning to, I followed. I didn't even feel my feet move. Just that pull, like gravity, but sideways. The procession moved through the streets, then into the woods, then back, circling endlessly in silence. My body moved, but I didn't feel tired. I didn't feel anything. I don't know how long I've been here. Sometimes I sleep, or maybe I don't. I just close my eyes, breathe, and when night comes, I walk. The same steps, the same path. And if you ever find this village, you'll know us. We won't speak. We won't blink. We'll just be waiting, breathing, quiet, and maybe, if you stay too long, you'll start walking too. The Red Shelf. I took the job at the Reykjavik bookshop to get away from everything. It wasn't a grand decision. I didn't flee a ruined relationship or burn out at some high-stakes career. I just wanted quiet, something slow, something that let me breathe without checking a clock every 10 minutes. When I saw the posting, Assistant Archivist Wanted, I applied the same day and got a call the next morning. The shop sat at the end of a narrow street in the old district, close to the harbor. It had 3 floors, 2 open to the public, and a third below street level for storage and records. That basement became my home. It smelled like leather and dust. The kind of place where the light never felt quite right, where your voice echoed in strange ways. I loved it. Most of my job was sorting, reshelving, cataloging older materials that hadn't been digitized yet. The store had been around for nearly a century, and its collection included everything from rare Icelandic poetry to books with no listed authors and titles you couldn't pronounce. And then there was the Red Shelf. It sat in the farthest corner of the basement, tall, with peeling crimson paint and an uneven back that leaned slightly toward the wall. It wasn't part of the catalog. No barcodes, no spine labels, no tracking numbers. At first, I thought it was decorative. The books on it were strange. Worn bindings, faded ink, no covers with art, no publisher logos. Most were in Icelandic, a few in Latin, some in languages I didn't even recognize. No one ever checked them out. No one ever dusted them. But they were always there. One morning, I noticed a gap. A single book missing from the top row. I checked the log. Nothing borrowed. No staff notes. I didn't think much of it. People took things without asking all the time. The next morning, the book was back. Same spot. Same slight tilt. As if it had never moved. That happened again. And again. I started watching more carefully. I made little pencil marks on the shelves to track which books disappeared. They always returned by morning, sometimes earlier. Once, I watched it happen. It was late, maybe just after 10 p.m. I was finishing paperwork and glanced over at the red shelf. One book was missing, an old one, bound in cracked gray leather. I looked away for maybe 10 seconds. When I turned back, the book was there. No sound, no movement, just there. I should have left it alone, but I didn't. The next day, I decided to organize it. I brought gloves, a notepad, a pen. I thought I'd finally get some kind of record of what was on the shelf. Nothing dramatic, just a small act of control over something that didn't seem to follow the rules. I pulled the first book. Heavy. No title. Inside, the pages were filled with handwritten text. Tight, looping script in dark ink. I couldn't read it. The letters bent in unnatural ways. But the feeling it gave me wasn't confusion. It was discomfort. Like the words didn't want to be looked at. I flipped to the middle of the book. One page had a drawing. A house with no doors. Only windows. And all the windows were black. The kind of black that makes you look twice to be sure it's even ink. I put the book down. Tried the next. That one was worse. The handwriting changed halfway through. From tight and controlled to frantic, like someone had kept writing even as they bled. The last dozen pages were soaked through. Brownish stains like water or something thicker. I shelved it and stepped back. The room felt smaller, the air thinner, and something shifted. Not in the room, in me. That night, I dreamed of the shelf, not the books. The shelf itself. It grew, taller, wider, towering over me until the ceiling disappeared. The red paint pulsed like it was breathing, and from the books, a soft sound rose, not whispering, not pages turning, rustling. Like something moved inside the bindings. Trapped. I woke up sweating, my ears ringing. I didn't go into work the next day. When I returned, the shelf had changed. Slightly. The books were in a different order. One lay open, its pages flat and damp. I hadn't touched it. I closed it gently, reshelved it. But when I turned away, I heard it fall again. Behind me. Open. The lights flickered. I took the book home. I know how that sounds. I shouldn't have. I told myself I'd bring it back the next day. I just needed time to look, to understand. I didn't sleep that night. I opened the book on my desk. The pages had shifted again. New handwriting. It looked recent, familiar. It was mine. Words I hadn't written. Sentences that described moments I hadn't lived yet. A paragraph described me getting up, walking to the kitchen, pouring a glass of water. I got up, walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water. The words appeared as I read them. I dropped the book. The next morning, it was gone. I checked my bag, my apartment. Nothing. Back at the shop, it was on the shelf. Same spot. Closed. Waiting. But when I looked closer, the spine had changed. My name was on it, not handwritten, printed. I haven't touched the shelf since, but the dreams haven't stopped. The shelf appears everywhere now, in alleyways, reflected in puddles, in elevator mirrors, always just standing there, silent, full. Last week, a customer borrowed a book from the regular fiction section. The next morning, it was on the red shelf. They say the shelf isn't part of the inventory, but I think that's wrong. I think it's all inventory. Books that don't want to leave. Stories that write themselves. And people who open the wrong one don't close it again. Ash Path. My brother went into the woods 3 nights ago. He said he just wanted to walk, clear his head. The argument we had earlier wasn't anything serious, just the usual. I told him not to stay out late. He told me I wasn't his father. Then he grabbed his flashlight and headed out the back of the house toward the trees. The path starts just behind our rice field, winding into the forest like a crack in the earth. It's narrow, packed with dry dirt, and barely wide enough for 2 people to walk side by side. We'd used it as kids to get to the river, to escape chores, to run away from things we didn't want to face. But that was before. Before we noticed the footprints. That came later. At the time, it was just a shortcut. That night, I stayed up waiting for him. I sat by the window, watching the edge of the trees. The light in our kitchen flickered once, but I didn't think much of it. It gets like that when the humidity climbs. But the silence felt thicker than usual. No wind, no insects, no dogs barking in the distance. Just stillness. By midnight, he hadn't returned. I tried calling, but there was no signal. I told myself he probably fell asleep somewhere by the river, maybe with friends. But my gut wouldn't settle. When I finally stepped outside and walked to the forest's edge, the path looked different. It was darker than it should have been. And when I pointed my flashlight at the ground, I saw them. Footprints in ash. My brother's sandals left clear impressions. Size, tread, spacing. They led into the woods, not overlapping, not back and forth, just in. The strange part was how clean they looked. Like each step had burned away a perfect outline in pale gray powder. And there were no footprints coming out. I didn't follow them that night. Instead, I went back home and told myself he'd show up in the morning. Maybe dirty, maybe hungover, maybe with some wild story. But he'd return. He didn't. By the second day, I told the others. A few men from the village helped search. We brought flashlights and sticks and walked the path until the trees swallowed the sun. The footprints were still there. Still ash. Still only going one way. Halfway down the trail, the wind shifted. It wasn't cold, but it smelled wrong. Not rot, not decay. Something dry, like old firewood, like incense long after it's gone out. One of the men, a neighbor who had known our family for years, refused to go any farther. Said he suddenly couldn't remember why he was there. He turned around and left without a word. That night, I sat at the edge of the path until almost dawn. No sound, no light. And then I saw them. Footprints, not walking in, coming out. Soft prints forming in the dirt as if someone invisible was retracing my brother's steps. No one was there, but the footprints were fresh. The air above them shimmered faintly, like heat rising from concrete. Each step landed exactly where his had gone in. Exactly. But there was no weight, no pressure, just the outline. By the time the sun rose, the prints had reached the edge of the village and stopped. I followed them, crouching low, heart pounding. That's when I noticed something stranger. The ash wasn't just sitting on the ground. It had sunk in, like it had become part of the dirt, as if the path itself had recorded the steps, not just marked them, but absorbed them. My brother's footsteps didn't come back, only their echo. The village grew quiet after that. No one talked about it. No one asked questions. But every night, I went back. The prints kept coming. Not just one pair anymore. New ones. Different sizes. Some smaller, some larger. Always starting deep in the woods, appearing step by step, and ending at the edge of the trees. Always in ash. Always without a body. No one saw them form. But they were always there by morning. I tried placing objects in the way. Rocks, sticks, anything to break the line. The prints stepped around them, deliberately. Like whoever, or whatever, was walking knew I was watching. One night, I stayed on the path as long as I could, flashlight in hand, waiting. Nothing. I blinked just once, and the prints were ahead of me. Closer. Still no sound, no presence, just that soft, crumbling trail of gray. I ran home. The next day, the path had changed again. The dirt had lightened. Not gray, not white. Ash-colored. The trees were quieter now. The birds didn't come near. Even the dogs stayed away. The whole village began to lean away from that direction, as if the earth itself had tilted slightly, warning us to look elsewhere. But I couldn't. My brother never came back. His shoes were never found. No body. No bones. Just those footsteps. A perfect trail that leads in. And a hollow trail that walks out. Now, I hear them before I see them. not the footsteps. The breath. A soft, slow exhale. One for every print. As if something's remembering what it felt like to be human. I don't know where the path leads, or what waits at the end, but I know it takes things, and leaves behind only shadows made of dust. Tomorrow night, I'll follow it, step for step, and if I don't come back, if all that returns are ashes pressed into earth, please don't wait for me. Don't follow. Not all trails are meant to lead home.